Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with Jessa from Jessa Rose Wellness. We got connected on Instagram about a few months ago because her page is all about female wellness, hormonal health, period specific. And I think that fits really well with what I talk about on stellar cycles. And I'm just really glad that I connected with Jessa because our conversations through the DMs already have been super insightful, and the information that she shares on her Instagram is really, really potent and really great, and also breaks it down really easily for women to understand too. So, Jessa, would you like to kind of introduce yourself, how you got into this field? And we'll go into your background a little more, but just kind of give us a little spiel on who you are and what you do.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, Alina. I'm so glad to be here with you and just to be on this podcast and being able to talk more about this work, because the reason that I really ended up getting into this work is simply that my body needed it. My body invited me in so much. And then through my own healing journey, healing my own cycle and all of the other things that were happening, because if I want women to know one thing, it's that your cycle is a reflection of everything else. So when you heal your cycle, you have to heal everything else. And my body invited me to do all that. And that was this big journey. And then I realized that, of course, I want to share this with everyone else. And of course, this is really where my life is taking me. So, professionally, I consider myself a holistic women's health practitioner. I am a licensed acupuncturist and practitioner of classical Chinese medicine. I'm a fertility awareness educator. And I also have taken many trainings in many other modalities that don't really give me official titles. So I merge it all together in my practice of holistic women's health. And I practice both online and in person in ways that can really deeply support full body and menstrual cycle healing, especially for period pain, because that's my niche right now, because that is just such an underserved niche. And so, yeah, that's really where I'm coming to this from. And I've been in practice for a little over 4 years. And so, really just ready to get this wisdom out to more women so that it can change more lives and bodies, and women can just feel better.
Absolutely. And I'm just so glad there's really more practitioners who are branching out in their practices, getting trained in all these different modalities, because I think up until a few years ago, people would really only trust someone if they had an MD next to their name. But how many times has an MD actually helped us to deal with these problems, right? Their general mode of operations is the birth control pill, you're welcome, and then that's kind of the band-aid that a lot of us have put over our period issues, myself included. I also had terrible cramps, and I was like, well, I keep hearing that birth control is going to fix it. But that's just, like I said, a band-aid. The actual reflection that your period is trying to show you, hey, like something's systematically wrong. So, would you mind going into a little bit about your own journey and your story? Like what happened to you with your cycle? How did you fix it? And then how did you move forward into sharing this information with other women?
I would say my journey kind of started when, well, of course, it's like you get your first period and it's like, oh, this is a thing. And I did have period cramps, but there was no education around it. And so when I was offered hormonal contraception at the age of 16, I took it. I was like, yeah, of course, this is going to be great. I think the funniest kind of biggest lie that we hear is like about birth control is like, oh, it makes your body think you're pregnant. And like the real truth is no, it makes your body think that you're postmenopausal. But when
Mhm.
it says makes you think you're pregnant, it's like we have this image of like, oh, that's like beautiful and still fertile and all these things. And
Mhm.
it's simply not true. But that's actually like the words that my doctor told me when I was 16. And so I took the birth control pill, and I took that from ages about 16 through 21. I had tried in that time period multiple types because I kept getting migraine headaches and really bad breast tenderness. And I was just having a lot of weird symptoms too, and weight gain. And yeah, just didn't feel good. Depression too,
Mhm.
for sure. So then at some point, I tried multiple types of the oral contraceptive, like the pill. Then I switched to, I think at one point I tried the Mirena. That was horrible too. That's a hormonal IUD for those who aren't familiar with it. That completely stopped even any bleeding, because at least with the hormonal pill, I had like the breakthrough bleeds because we never have a real period while we're, on
Right.
hormonal
It's a
contraceptives.
placebo. It's a placebo bleed. It's a withdrawal bleed. It's not a real bleed.
Yeah. I mean, they actually put it in. So when they were designing the pill, at first it wasn't there and women were upset. And so then they put it in so that women would be less upset and they would still think that they had their periods. And I was like, well, that's kind of manipulative. So, and then I tried, yes, the Mirena, that completely stopped everything. I felt horrible. Then I tried the NuvaRing. And then I tried the copper IUD. With the copper IUD, you do actually ovulate, but that comes with its own huge slew of side effects, especially from the copper itself. And copper is so inflammatory in the uterus, in the womb lining, and can cause
Wow.
systemic inflammation and so many issues.
I'm surprised to hear that because a lot of the times I think people think that the copper IUD is safer because it has no hormones in it. But I'm just now finding out just what you said just now that the copper is inflammatory too. So it can scar up the inside of your uterus as well.
Yeah, so the way that the copper IUD actually works is that it causes an inflammatory process within your uterine lining so that we cannot have the hormonal processes that happen if there was a, fertilized embryo that's trying to implant. It simply couldn't because the lining is too hostile for life. And so, I
Mhm.
mean, on one level, it's like, okay, yeah, I guess that's effective, but physiologically, that's a lot of inflammation that's being caused in the body. I also experience, I would say, a decent amount of women also experience major issues with their gut health because everything gets inflamed, as well as anxiety, mental, emotional issues, and general signs of copper toxicity, which there's a whole spectrum of that. And Western medicine still hasn't even acknowledged that copper toxicity is really a thing, but it is. And
Mm.
so this is where most of the options really that we're presented with from our doctors are not going to really give us any way of being with our bodies and our cycles that's effectively preventing pregnancy and not causing harm. And so I didn't ovulate from age basically 16 till 22, 23. Then I got the copper IUD for 4 years because I really thought I was doing the best thing I could. The other thing
Mhm.
about the copper IUD is like, we're like, oh, it's non hormonal, right? So it's good for our hormones. But copper and estrogen have they increase each other all the time. Like they build on
Wow.
each other. So just because it's non hormonal, it still has hormonal impacts on our bodies. With the copper IUD, that was definitely the worst cramping and heavy bleeding that I'd ever had. I even ended up with iron deficiency anemia, like so low that and I had a doctor tell me that that was fine. And I was like, oh, okay, things really, really need to change here. And so I'd started dabbling in holistic health and really started receiving some amazing benefits of acupuncture. And I decided, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to school for Chinese medicine because my parents wanted me to become an MD, especially my dad. And I was like, no, that's not right for me. It's not worked for me so far. Already at that age, I was like, it's failed me multiple times. I had a ton of other health issues too, and especially like anxiety, depression, so much that I think women have in college. So I was like, yeah, I think we'll do the Chinese medicine thing instead. And so that kind of was the
Mhm.
doorway and how I got into all of the other modalities that I practice too.
Wow, yeah. So you said acupuncture you had really good results from. What other things were you implementing that were actually starting to help more so than the birth control or even the copper IUD?
Once I got my copper IUD out, I mean, that was a profound experience. I was, and I hadn't honestly even considered much womb healing until that point. It was just starting to kind of creep into my life, womb and cycle healing. I don't know, it kept popping up and a friend recommended me a book. And then I like heard about this teacher and there was like flyers at school and just kind of all these ways. And, of course, in Chinese medicine, we talk about the menstrual cycle. And I was like, oh, mine doesn't look like that. Like what's optimal? I was like,
Mm.
oh gosh. So it kept on creeping in. And I was actually in China, and one of these amazing teachers just looked me in the eye. We were at this retreat center in this Taoist monastery. And she looked at me and she's like, you need to get your copper IUD out. And I was like, oh gosh, I was called out. But I
Yeah.
did. I literally made an appointment still over the internet while I was in China for the day after I got back from, the ridiculously long flight. And I got it out. And then I was like, okay, now it's time to really start healing my womb. I had already started learning a bit of fertility awareness before that. And so I was like, oh, I've actually been preparing for this for a little while. And so then all of a sudden I was like in it. And I was like, this is time. It's time to heal. And so the modalities that helped me the most were I started receiving Mayan abdominal massage from a practitioner who also utilized yoni steaming, right? So those two together,
Mhm.
you know, the steam, so yoni steaming or pelvic steaming or vaginal steaming, those are different names that people will call it, bee steaming even. For those who aren't familiar with the practice, it's sitting in a certain position. I love it when you actually have a little box for it because it's comfortable, but sitting so that
Mhm.
your pelvis and the opening to your vaginal canal, your whole vulva, is exposed to warm medicinal steam with organic herbs. And there's, you know, specific herbs you choose for different conditions, etc. But
Mhm.
that steam provides circulation and it actually brings the steam and the aromatic components of these herbs all the way up into your uterus, into your cervix, and heals the pelvic bowl. Abdominal massage and Mayan abdominal massage, specifically for those who aren't as familiar, is really what it sounds like. It's massaging all of your abdominal organs and especially
Mhm.
massaging the uterus, making sure the womb is in the correct position and that everything is open so that there's circulation and nerve flow and that these areas are actually starting to become healthy. You can't do
Mhm.
any abdominal massage either and or yoni steaming with an IUD. So I was so glad that I found them after because I was like, oh, yes, this is the perfect thing. I also use the modality of holistic pelvic care, which is a modality that was created by Tammy Kent. She's a physical therapist who's also kind of a womb whisperer. And she combined the two of really how could pelvic floor physical therapy like practices, internal vaginal work, how could that be used to actually
Mhm.
heal our relationship to our wombs, our ovaries,
Mhm.
our pelvic bowls? And so those
Mhm.
modalities were really what catalyzed my healing journey. And those are now all what I combine with Chinese medicine and functional medicine in my clinical practice today. So every one of those modalities, you know,
Yes.
I was so lucky to go to school in Portland and I had access to all of them. And so I just was like, yes, I'm doing this. It's time. I was still also learning fertility awareness and studying that with a teacher. So all of that together really gives like a fully truly holistic approach, mind, body, heart, soul, spirit to womb and period healthcare. And I was so blessed that my cramps and, you know, my all of these issues really resolved in about 6 months after getting my IUD removed.
Absolutely. You know, yoni steaming, it's such an amazing thing. I've done it myself too. And one thing that our diets and lifestyles really create in our pelvis, especially in the rest of the body too, but in the pelvis is kind of stickiness and mucus and a lot of stagnation. So, like you said, with the massage, it helps to remove some of that stagnation, but also the steam, it helps literally dislodge fibroids or anything like that. So it's really amazing. And herbs are so potent. So if anyone is curious to try yoni steaming, definitely try to find a practitioner who offers that, and then maybe you can start doing it at home because it is pretty powerful.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And for anyone listening to, if you don't have a yoni steam practitioner nearby, I do offer remote yoni steam consultations, and
Oh,
you'll get
that's
access to
awesome.
all of my resources on how to steam at home, anywhere from the most simple steam setup without any tools, besides obviously you need a pot and you need the herbs, all the way to my favorite steam seats. And I do a custom blend for anyone who does those sessions with me. So it's really, really fun to have, you know, your customized blend of herbs. And you can even
Mhm.
drink them as a tea while you're steaming at the same time and just take in all those herbs. And so I love doing that with as getting as many
Mhm.
women steaming as possible is pretty much one of my life
Mhm.
goals.
Absolutely. And it's not just for period problems, it also helps at the end of pregnancy. They say not to steam throughout the pregnancy, but at the end, when you do want your cervix to open up, when you want to, you know, increase the speed and ease of labor, you know, and then also to heal
Yes.
afterwards. So that's amazing.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, when you were finally on this path where you were learning all these things, implementing them for yourself, did it truly feel like you had finally gotten into your life purpose?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. It kind of like creeped up and then all of a sudden it was just there and it was like so clear.
Hmm.
And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, this is it. This is what everything else was for. And even
Hmm.
clarifying in myself and being like, oh, all of my own cycle and period health problems were actually like to help give me perspective and to help
Hmm.
me know how to heal myself and know what the experience is of healing in my own body. So then I can even more better empathize and be present with others on their own journey. So
Mhm.
not only did it feel like I received my own purpose, I also kind of stepped into a place of forgiveness for my body or compassion in that sense of like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm not just suffering and I have health issues. And oh, it turns a story of struggling into a story of, wow, this was all on purpose. And so, yeah, it
Mhm.
definitely felt like that for sure.
Just like a story of hope, a light at the end of the tunnel, that this was all for something. And I believe that too. I think that we are given problems because we're meant to find a solution for others. So the things that we personally go through, it's meant to help us empathize, sympathize, find compassion for others. And sometimes it can be really easy to just be like, why me? Why is this happening to me? But it's really so that we can share that knowledge with other people. So, what was the most difficult lesson throughout this process for you, and why was it so challenging to uncover or implement?
Mm. The first thing that came up when you asked that was just
Mhm.
really learning to slow down,
Mhm.
really learning to live at my own body's pace, really letting my body heal at its own pace. We live in such a culture that is continually go, 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 right? We're so linear. We're so fast. Like everything in this culture is like, how can we do it faster? Okay. And then there's the assumption that that's good. And of course, I didn't really know any other life. Most of us don't until we start to really heal our bodies. And especially as women, tapping into a cyclical way of living and a slower
Mhm.
pace of life. And that definitely was just the biggest thing over time. It takes time. And for any woman listening to this who's like, oh, I live fast, like, oh, that just feels like it's maybe inaccessible to them to live slower, to live cyclically. It really does take time to get there. We can't just go from going 80 miles an hour to going 20. You've got to take the time to slow down and really be gentle with yourself in the process. And so, for me, it's always just been this like to this push pull of like wanting to do my business, right? And like wanting to move fast with my business and my practice because I'm like, oh, now I have this information. I've taken these trainings, learned these modalities. I have the embodied experience. I'm ready to share it. And then being like, oh, and I have to still embody my work. Like I have to be that person. I can't work 70 hours a week. My body
Mhm.
doesn't want that, doesn't let me. My cycle is like, absolutely not. And so I think that's the biggest piece that I also see a lot with most of my clients is this dichotomy between what their body says is healthy and what their cycle wants and what their intuition really says of how they need to live. And then the cultural and structural pieces of their lives. And most of my clients still have to go to work. And some of them still work 9 to 5 jobs. And these are all these realities where we're learning how to be cyclical, feminine, embodied beings. And we're still stuck in a linear, overly structured, masculine, overly doing paradigm. And so, how do we rectify those two? And I mean, really, it's just coming to as much balance and compassion as we can, because not one of us can, on our own, can completely change the system. But I think if enough of us start to really reclaim the type of life that we want to live, then together, maybe we
Mhm.
can make some systematic change.
Yeah, much easier said than done, because like you said, people have a lot of responsibilities. Some of them work not one job but two jobs, and the amount of patients that I saw too in my ultrasound field when they would come into the hospital with IUD problems, uterus problems, period problems, ovary problems, it almost always came down to how stressed they were in their life. Stress is just an absolute killer for women. I think men are built to handle stress. But now, in the world that we live in, women think that they should be able to take on the same amount of stress that men take on, fast the same way that men can fast. But then, truly, our body really knocks us back into place. It's like, you can't do that. You really can't. How do you continue to add to your knowledge? Obviously, you're always working with patients, you're still educating yourself, but how do you continue to add to your knowledge and continue learning, even though you're an expert now in this field?
Thankfully, it's great, through my licensure. So I still have to take 60 CEUs every 4 years through my national
Mhm.
accreditation and state licensure. So that always definitely keeps me on task and always learning something new. Like I just literally got a new course on Chinese medicine and endometriosis. I already studied endometriosis a lot, but I'm always really excited for new perspectives and I really love it. So getting to study these things and especially from other unique perspectives is always really, really fun for me. And I'm always branching out
Mhm.
too into different modalities. And yeah, it's like when it's fun, I do it. And so I
Mhm.
know I'm doing the right thing because I enjoy studying all the different pieces.
Mhm.
This year too, I'm going to be taking a shamanic medicine practitioner's training too to weave in more energy medicine into my practice because
Mhm.
I've realized what comes up a lot for women too, that I want more skills to hold. So I already do hold space for this with some other modalities, but is ancestral womb trauma, sexual, medical, pelvic trauma, and all of these different patternings and how they weave into our pelvic bowl and can be a root cause, not the only root cause, but a root cause of many of the menstrual cycle issues and period problems that we see. And so I'm adding on always like new modalities to really work in a truly holistic way. Like that's my biggest kind of guideline behind my practice is truly, truly, truly holistic medicine. And so, yeah, I'm pretty much
Mhm.
excited every year. I'm like, ooh, what can I learn this year that adds to that skill
Mhm.
set and deepens
Mhm.
different places and ways? And yeah, all the
Mhm.
ways.
Can you share with us a little bit about this weekend retreat that you went on? You were off of social media, but then you came back. I think it was like maybe a month ago or so, but you went on this retreat, and I just want to hear a little more about what did you guys do, and then how did you implement things when you came home?
Sure. So I went to Red Earth Herbal Gathering. So it's a women's herbal gathering in the mountains. And it's really, it's not only focused on women's health. Like we talked about health from all these different perspectives, but it was an absolutely life-changing experience to be surrounded with so many amazing women and healers and herbalists and just like passionate women who were, excited to be reconnecting with nature. We were on gorgeous, gorgeous land with a river flowing through and right under a huge mountain. And basically, we walked around barefoot all weekend, bathed naked in the river, and learned about herbal
Mhm.
medicine. There was a yoni steaming tent where we got to steam together. I've done yoni steaming for so many years, but I've never steamed in a circle with other women. And I've never just gotten to just
Wow.
receive that. And so that
Mhm.
was really powerful for me. And I met also so many women in the community that I live in now, which I've only lived here since last year. So that was so healing for me. And we went on plant walks and all these different things. And, I'd say more than anything, it's just that retreat, that gathering was a real reminder of living slowly and living cyclically and being just like a little bit more in connection with nature. And that's something I always strive for. But ever since that, I've stopped like striving for it. And instead, I've relaxed into living in more in nature and just been like, oh, yeah, like I
Mm.
can go have my cup of tea outside. Oh, and I could take my feet off and ground and earth while I'm out here. And oh, yeah, like let's just go on another little walk today. And oh, and then, I'm walking around the nature here and I'm like, ooh, common mallow, ooh, lamb's quarters. Like now I'm able to like
Mhm.
identify more plants. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I took away. I really went and was like, I'm not going to be super heady and focused on learning because I've already studied herbalism a lot. And I was like, how can I just let this all drop into my body more so that it feels more embodied, more just
Mhm.
me and less like, continually striving and trying to be
Mhm.
less heady and just more embodied.
Yes, I can attest to that because I think there's so much information out there now, and it's a lot of good information, but people overcomplicate it and they keep it in their heads and mulling it over, trying to understand it. But like our body just craves that simple ancestral life. Like even though our world is so modernized and so industrialized, but the human body has not caught up to it. And every time that we get too deep into this world, our bodies protest. They want to be by the ocean. They want to be bare feet on the ground in a park. They want to just lay there and look up at the trees. That's really what we're wired for. So that sounds like a wonderful weekend.
Absolutely. Ah,
Yeah.
yes, it was fantastic. And absolutely, I agree with just everything you just said.
Yeah. Yeah, and then let me just ask you just about some connections in your life. Was there anybody that embarked on this journey with you when you were kind of going through healing and learning, or was it just kind of solo?
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many amazing people to support me and different practitioners, but really, this practitioners, teachers, mentors, of course,
Mhm.
like there's been so many people who have walked different parts of this journey with me. But really, this has been my journey. This has been a solo journey, but deeply supported and connected
Mhm.
and supported by so many amazing people, as well as the earth. There's been so much support. But yeah, I really have walked most of this journey alone. Now I'm in a really supportive partnership too. My partner and I,
Mhm.
we met at Chinese medicine school. And so it's really fun to have someone to kind of always be on this both healing and learning journey on at the same time. And
Mm.
so I'd say now
Yeah.
he's my also biggest partner on this journey. But I think for each of us, really, our healing journey is ours, and other
Mhm.
people are going to come and go. They're going to flow into it. They're going to offer support and wisdom and guidance in different ways. But the healing journey is almost like each of our own heroines' journey, right? The hero's journey, right?
Mhm.
Like this is just what we get to do if we so choose. And
Yes.
it can be one of the most beautiful healing experiences too.
Absolutely. So that's amazing that even your partner helped you along on this and like try to understand because I feel like for a lot of, I'm gonna guess your husband, male
Man, yeah.
partner, right?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a male
So
partner. Yeah. We're
male
engaged.
partner.
I
So
just don't really say
yes,
fiance so
yes,
much.
yes.
Yeah.
Got it, got it. So I'm just saying because like men for the most part, like they're just like that's women's stuff. I don't understand it. Don't let your period be an excuse. But it's like, no, this is such a great self-awareness tool for the both of us to implement.
Absolutely.
So let's get into your actual practice. So your tracking practices, things like that. What do you use? How do you stay on top of it? How do you stay organized within your cycle? I mean, at this point, I'm sure it's like second nature, but like, let's say we're talking to a beginner who's very overwhelmed with all of this information.
I am a fertility awareness educator. So I really am passionate about basically fertility awareness is teaching us how to live in alignment with our bodies and our cycles. And so cycle tracking is one of the basic practices of fertility awareness. It is the essence. And so I actually teach all my clients first to track on paper. I actually have a course called Embodied Cycles. And so I've really taken all of the information on how to really come into awareness and understanding of what is physiologically happening in your body over a cycle, then how to
Mhm.
map that all out into a way that can be made sense of on paper. I usually start people there. We can then make interpretations on it, like, oh, this is the time I'm fertile. And then often, though, I always get a little pushback with the paper thing because everyone's like, oh, let's use an app. And the app that I love and use and recommend for all of my clients is called Read Your Body. I love it. It's very inexpensive per month. I think it's like maybe $199 or $299 a month or $14.99 for a
Mm.
year. And I love it because it's founded by a nonprofit. It is all a body literacy nonprofit for cycle tracking in the UK. And it is the only app that I've found that really lets you put in whatever data you want to. And it doesn't try to give any of its own interpretations. It lets you decide every day. It doesn't use any algorithms or anyone else's data to make
Mm.
its
Got it.
interpretations. So that's what I use because I'm not really into any apps that make conclusions on our bodies, even like natural cycles. I think that can work for some women, but it does use other people's data to talk about what's going on in our bodies. So I think every woman should be empowered enough to be able to make their own decisions about their body and know what's going on every day and make their own
Mhm.
determinations about are they fertile? Are they not? What kind of sex should they be having based on their reproductive intentions? So that's where I really start most people. And so if anyone's interested, just reach out because I have programs and
Mhm.
everything built to support and hold anyone in learning more about their cycle and really getting attuned to it.
Absolutely. So, would you mind leaving our listeners with a few tips? So, do you have any, off the top of your head, any practices for relieving period pain or moods naturally?
I mean, the most important thing is just, first of all, being present with what comes up. We have a
Mm.
tendency to pretend that we need to just stuff it down, ignore it, and somehow be functional, be normal, go back to doing normal life. And if you're really experiencing intense pain, yes, of course, there's so much you can do. I've literally made a 6-month program for that. So it's really hard to give, what would be the advice for specific
Hmm.
reasons and root causes behind that. But most importantly, try to be as present with it as possible. If you can take a day off work to just be with it, and usually you've been overriding it and just taking tons of Advil or Tylenol or something else,
Hmm.
instead, just be with your body first. Our bodies always are going to tell us what's going on, what is the reason behind things. They're always going to let us know. And so instead of overriding it, or birth control is the ultimate overriding. Instead of doing this, just be present and start paying attention. And even if you're not cycle tracking, maybe writing down in a journal every day what you're experiencing in your body and your cycle. Like, oh, I had a little twinge of cramp on the right side today, and I felt really angsty. And yeah, they're just the most basic cycle tracking and paying attention to ourselves is actually where all healing is going to start. And so, once again, let's not make it too heady. There's not even anything that you really have to do besides become ever more present with yourself and more present with your body and more present with your
Hmm.
cycle. And so start there,
Yes.
and then you'll have so much more spaciousness for anything else, any healing that you need to happen.
And that being present is so hard because, like, pain is not fun, and we just want to not experience it. But, pain also help lead us to something very good. So to leave off, would you like to share with our listeners one piece of advice that you think every woman, every girl, no matter what age they are, what stage in their cycle they're in, that they should hear?
Mm. I guess it would just be that your cycle has the potential to be the ultimate guidepost and guideline and source of wisdom for anything that you need in your life. You don't have to look externally. You don't have to look into other sources or books or other people in your life for your own wisdom. Your cycle and your womb has everything you need to
Hmm.
thrive, to feel good, to live passionately with purpose and devotion. And your body holds everything. And I think that that's it more than anything else. I just say, start that connection in whatever way that looks like for you. Do something fun with your body today and see
Hmm.
what comes from there. And whenever your body gives you a little message of like, oh, I want to do this, whenever you get those inklings, follow them, because that is your body's wisdom talking to you.
Hmm.
And the more you listen, the better everything's going to be. I absolutely can promise that.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing your story and for sharing everything that you already do in your work with women and in helping guide them to truly a beautiful cycle where it doesn't debilitate their life. So, would you be able to tell our listeners where they can find you, your website, your Instagram, anything you'd like to plug?
Sure, absolutely. So my Instagram is Jessa Rose Wellness. My website is jessarosewellness.com. And I'm actually going to be launching also a solo podcast where I can talk a little bit more about these things. So
Awesome.
it's more of a, and it's going to be called Heart and Womb. It's going to be coming out in November. So I'm really excited for
That's
that.
beautiful.
I have many offerings. My biggest offering is a 6-month program called Love Your Period for period pain and cramping. And that program is my life's work. So if you're experiencing that, come check me out. And always, for anyone, send me a DM. Let's talk. I always want to just be fully available for anyone. And yeah, thank you so much, Alina, for the opportunity to just share about this work. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. And yeah, just sending this invitation out there. It's really meaningful. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on, Jessa. And Stellar Cycles Girls, we will see you in the next episode.